Hello, everybody. Welcome to the I Care About You podcast. I'm Juliana J, and today we're talking about how to deal with failure. Before we begin, I would like to remind you to order my book. It's out now. It has a lot of really great exercises and information about how to work through dark times for yourself and also how to help others. So I'll put the link in the description. And as always, please subscribe if you enjoy this content. So let's get into it. Failure, how to deal with it. I chose this topic because I myself am dealing with some failure right now. I took on a position as an interim director to a business, an organization that was really in crisis. They had lost their executive director very unexpectedly, and their finances were kind of in disarray. So I came on board, and it is my failing that I did not insist on more things that needed to happen in a more organized way. There was a particular human there who had been there prior, and I let them lead the show, mostly because they were a man and they projected themselves with this air of authority, right? So even though I knew in my heart of hearts, my intuition was telling me, please. Well, my intuition wasn't saying please. My intuition was saying, something's up with this. You need to do something about this. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to be strong here. But I backed down. I let that person call the shots. And as a consequence, things just became more dire over time. So I'm dealing with kind of two failures here. One, it's my own failing of not listening to myself, not advocating for myself, not knowing within myself that I knew what the right thing was, that I'm confident in what I believed and my knowledge base of all the work that I've done for so many years now. Every once in a while, you still seep back into that old way of thinking. And that was me in this moment, or through this time. So I'm dealing with my failure of not being more forceful, more strong, more demanding, not really stepping into that role in a way that I should have. I'm also dealing with failure that was from someone else, but that because I am the leader, it's my fault, right? So even though I did not do any of those actions, I'm going to take the fall in some way for the failure of this other person to do what needed to be done. So there's two types of failures here I'm dealing with. One I directly caused, and one that's sort of being projected onto me in a way. And I think that's pretty common in the work world. We often take the fall, or we're often blamed for things that maybe we didn't have total control over in the work world. And also our own failings of, oh shoot, I should have done that differently. And it doesn't really matter where the thoughts of failure are coming from. The consequences are the same. The consequences are the same. The emotions are the same. The negative self-talk's the same. It's all the same. There's a struggle with imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not thoughtful enough. I'm not direct enough. I'm not strong enough. That whole realm of not being enough. And then there's all this self-hatred stuff that comes into play. I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. I suck. What a failure. How dumb I am. All this kind of negative self-talk rolls around in your brain. And then there's also the emotional side. There can be fear, you can feel unsafe, there can be anger, you can have a lot of sadness, you can feel depressed, you can feel fight or flight, you can develop a lot of anxiety around it just because those emotions are fostering this anxiety, and this is how you're coping with it, right? You can be just frozen. There's so many ways you can react to failure, and it's all the same regardless of how the failure has manifested in your life. So today we're going to talk about some ways you can really deal with failure. Obviously, your own way of doing it is the best way for you, but I'm going to offer you a few ways you can deal with it and how to cope with failure. Now, obviously, we've all heard that failure is the major stepping stone to success. We all know this in theory, but yet when we're faced with it, we tend to not think of it that way. We tend to think of it as a failure, and a door opens for all of our negative self-talk and self-beliefs and just self-sabotaging and all of that. So you need to change that mechanism. Instead of opening the door to those beliefs, you need to reframe what failure is. Failure is not a reinforcement of how horrible you are. Failure is a stepping stone to success. So it's redefining what failure is. And this was hard for me. I wanted to just hide from it, but I realized that, I need to take it as what it is, something that happens to everyone. No one will make it through life without a failure. It's a human condition. It's a stepping stone to success. It's a learning moment. However you want to define failure for yourself, it is not a reinforcer to how you aren't worthy of a positive life or you are not a good person. So it's reshaping what failure means to you. Another thing is to really face the truth about the situation. And this is so hard. We want to deny it. We want to avoid thinking about it. We want to come up with excuses and all of that. But facing the problem takes away so much of the power of failure. Once you face it no longer has this control over you in that it's opening your negative self-talk and opening up those doors and making you think about every scenario where you've ever failed or someone's ever told you that you let them down or you've ever gotten in trouble. Failure brings up all those old memories. And that's really powerful because you're using it to just reinforce these negative feelings about yourself. And then there was a time I was 5 when I got in trouble for eating a cookie when I wasn't supposed to. And then as a teenager, when I didn't come home when the street lights went on or whatever it is, you just run through all of that. When I didn't get into my top college, when I didn't get the job I wanted, and it just compounds onto itself if you don't address it. It's more like the world is doing this to you. The world is doing this to you because you are not good enough. But if you change that framework and you acknowledge it, oh, yes, I messed up here. I should have done this. Or this is a failure of the team. I can share some of it, but I don't have to share all of it. Or however you're going to take it on. Yes, I play a role here. And what is a role? And just acknowledging the failure, not as something internally inside yourself, you are a failure. Take that failure out and examine it as a theory. It's not, why am I such a failure? I'm the worst, blah, blah, blah. No, that's reinforcing your negative beliefs. Instead, it's like, I play a role in this failure. What is this failure? And what could I have done differently? What did I do now? How can I fix the situation? Maybe it's as simple as saying sorry to someone. What are the components of this failure? And what do I own? And what is not owned by me? And how do I deal with it? Just really, really not going through this denial phase with it, but seeing it for what it is. And as soon as you see it for what it is, it loses the power because when you're denying it, you're putting a lot of energy into making sure everybody also sees your point. You're really putting a lot of energy into keeping you from looking at the truth. You're putting a lot of energy into deflecting to yourself. You're putting a lot of energy into all your negative self-talk. You're putting a lot of energy into telling other people that it wasn't your fault. And as soon as you acknowledge that, wow, this failure exists here, you can let all of that energy go and really concentrate on why it happened and what you can do about it. It takes away the failure. So it's not something living inside you as though you are a complete failure in life, but rather this failure happened during my workday. And what can I do about it? It becomes more of a problem solving game and less of a reinforcement of your worth. Here's another really big thing to do when a big failure happens. Maybe it's something like I mentioned earlier, you don't get into the college of your dreams or you don't get the job of your dreams. Allow yourself to mourn the loss of that dream, and it will help you just to work through it rather than stuffing it down as this is another failure I have. I'll just put it on top of all my other failures and stuff it down. Instead, mourn the loss of that. Find a way to do that compassionately with yourself and to get support when you need it. There was a study that showed when subjects wrote down their deepest thoughts and feelings about breakups, they recovered more quickly and had better physical health as a consequence. So mourning is a step forward to being able to let it go. If you take a moment to just really mourn the fact that you didn't get this thing that you wanted, or your relationship broke up, or you didn't get the job you wanted, or you didn't get the kudos that you wanted, whatever it is, to take the time to mourn that is the first step to being able to let it go. Another study about this exact thing, being able to mourn a failure, is that executives and people higher up in an organization who deliberately confronted feelings of job loss felt more control over the situation and had a much higher rate of reemployment moving forward. So if you can mourn the loss, again, this is not saying to yourself, I'm a failure, I didn't get this job, but more so like, oh, I didn't get this job. Maybe I'll look at my resume. Maybe I'll see how I can tweak things for the next time. You don't take it personally. You're mourning the loss of something that happened. Again, not you're taking it out of I'm a failure and into this failure occurred outside of me right here. What can I do about it? Actually mourning it is important. It does really help you get over it. I did this with this failure that I talked about earlier, and it really helped me just destigmatize it. It's not so charged anymore when I talk about it. Now it's more like this is something that happened. One of the big things is don't get stuck being victimized by it or being like, I'm a failure. Don't internalize it into who you are or become victimized by it in that things like, I can't have a successful relationship. I can't get a good job. I can't get into college. Don't become the failure itself. That isn't you. That's a situation that happened. That's not you. So don't become that, embody that. Oh, I'm the person that can't get into college. Oh, I'm the person that can't get a job. Oh, I'm the person that never has successful relationships. Oh, I'm the person that always picks a bad person to date. Then you're just creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of you are the person who will never find the thing you want because you're a failure. So instead, realize the failure is not you. It's not you, your essence. The failure is something that happened as a consequence to life. Another thing that is important is to check your expectations about whatever the failure was. Was it realistic? Sometimes your goals are so lofty and giant that going from point A to the finish line is a lot. And you need to break the goal down into these mini goals as you're climbing that ladder to the major goal. So it's checking to make sure, were my expectations realistic? I just got out of college and I'm applying for a senior position at a major company. Is that too big of a jump? Is that realistic? Or do you need to go for something and climb that corporate ladder if that's what you're wanting to do? You can't go from not knowing anything about something to being the expert without doing the work in between. So it's just checking in when a failure happens is was I reaching, I don't want to say reaching too high because I like that we have lofty goals and big thoughts and big dreams. And I think that is a major component of a healthy life. But keeping your expectations in a way that's manageable is much more successful than setting yourself up for failure. Because sometimes we self-sabotage by setting ourselves up for failure, having something that's not really obtainable in a split second. It's obtainable if you work towards it, but it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. Something like that. If you're always setting yourself up for failure, then you're using failure as a mechanism to reinforce negative beliefs about yourself. During failure, and this is important, to be kind to yourself, to do some self-care, to realize that you don't have to take it all in, like I'm saying. You can be like, wow, this really hurt. For me, I was feeling like this is a major blow to my career. This is a blackballing effect to me. I went way to the extreme about what it would be. I went, okay, I'm never going to get a job again because this situation is occurring, instead of just being kind to myself. So I switched gears. Sure, I play a role, but I don't have to take the full burden of everything as though I am a failure and no good at what I do. What lessons can you learn from the failure? That's a big thing for me. I always try to self-reflect. Self-reflection on a failure is important. You can journal about it, you can write about it, you can talk to a friend about it, you can talk to your therapist about it, or you can meditate on it, or do more than one of those things. It's really looking at, here's this failure, what have I learned from it? It did another door open. A lot of my failures, like I didn't get the job I wanted, were actually blessings, because I didn't get that job, but then the very next job that was so much more in my realm and seemed so much more exciting to me, I actually got. So it's being able to look at the silver lining in it, even if it's just, what did you learn about it? How are you going to proceed differently? And what are you going to do is really important. I reflected on that in this current situation I was talking about, and I decided, like, I am going to take this more authoritative approach, not in the way of being the big boss or anything like that, but for myself. I am going to think within myself that I know what the right thing is when I know what the right thing is, and I'm going to act on that rather than letting some authoritative person push me down. I'm not going to be submissive if I am really sure this is the right thing to do. So it's like looking for that positive aspect in failure. What is the gift the failure is giving you? Another thing that's really important is to be flexible, to be able to pivot, to welcome change, to do all those things, because sometimes failure is that we are trying to push the round peg into the square hole. We're trying to make something happen that time has come and gone, and we need to pivot or change or think differently about stuff. If the same failure keeps coming to you, reflection on it might give you some insight into, is this failure just because I am trying to make something work that isn't working, or I am not being flexible enough in a relationship to make the relationship work? Am I in a relationship and I don't care what the other person really thinks or wants? If they say anything in the relationship that I perceive as an attack on me, I'm going to blow up and be really mad rather than hearing them. I'm going to think I'm always right. These types of finality way of thinking. Ask yourself, if you're having chronic kind of the same type of failures over and over again, what role are you playing? Are you trying to make something happen to prove a point to yourself, to prove that you're worthy to yourself, and you're just reinforcing your own negative self-beliefs that you aren't worthy in the process, because you won't pivot, you won't be flexible, you won't shift, you won't change. Time moves on, and sometimes you have to be flexible and change. When you're a teenager and you're in that moment in your life, you have to change a little bit when you get into a serious relationship, because you're no longer just out having a good time, everything's great. Now you have a little bit more responsibilities. You do have to kind of shift and pivot. You decide to have kids. That's a shift and pivot and change. And that's always looking around to see what other people are doing and taking in knowledge and tidbits of advice and noticing, wow, that person did this and that worked really well. I'm going to try that myself. Learning, it's lifelong learning. You don't stop learning when you get out of high school and then that's how you judge your whole life until your last day. No, be a lifelong learner. Failure is about learning. Being a lifelong learner, being able to look at that failure and say, what can I learn from this? And what tools can I take forward? And how can I shift or pivot just slightly to be successful the next time this happens? What do I need? Do I need more emotional intelligence? Do I need more skills? Do I need to understand how to communicate with people? Do I need to take a course on Excel? Whatever it is, what do you need to do to have success the next time? And then be vulnerable, but also be secure in yourself. Have respect for yourself. So you want to be vulnerable so that you can dig in deep to what you can learn from your failure, but you also have self-compassion, have self-love, have self-worth. You want to reinforce that. You want to realize that you are not a jellyfish in the ocean and everybody can just come by and do what they want to you because you can't swim away. Realize that you do have power. You do have strength. You do have bravery. You can do what is necessary for yourself. You can protect yourself. If you're in a failing situation where you feel unsafe, then reflect on how you can get safe, what you need to do, and that you are worthy of safety. So those are just a few things to work on when you face failure. And we'll all face failure. It happens. It's not a personal definition for you. You are not a failure. You don't have to carry that through life. Failure happens throughout life as lessons to learn, things to understand. So, my friends, I hope this helped you next time you deal with failure, to just be vulnerable to it, be open to it. Do not take it as a self-definition, but rather, what are the blessings here? What can I learn here? What can I dissect here? How can I pull it away into its components and understand it better? How can I walk away feeling better about myself rather than internalizing it as something that I am? You are not that failure. That's something that happened. It's outside of you. So if you can just work with that and be open to acknowledging when failure happens and working through it in a way that works for you and getting support when you need it, your failures will become your successes. I promise you that. So for now, my friends, take good care. Know that I love you and I support you, and I'll see you in the next one.